Hey there, I'm Jesse Lynn.
And I'm Angela Lynn, and welcome back to another episode of But Where Are You Really From? Today we're talking about taking risks. And why it's so hard to do new things, even the ones that we are interested in trying. So, like, say a friend says a fun new activity that they've done, but it sounds kind of scary to you, and then you just don't do it, even though you're like, that could be fun. Why is it, do we think that is so difficult for us to do?
Well, first things first, I think that everyone has a different risk tolerance. I think you listeners have probably heard us discuss this in the past and probably heard me say many times, like, I'm a very low risk person. So it's not that I don't like trying new things, but I'm pretty averse to new things where there's some kind of like risk involved. So that's the first thing, is I think that everyone just has like different tolerances for trying new things. But the second thing that I want to say is that it's hard to try a new thing. Like, I feel like in the pandemic, so many people were doing so many new things that it felt like it was really easy to try a new thing. And sometimes it is, but like some of the things were really hard. Like, people were baking like sourdough breads. I'm like, where did you get the fucking yeast from? Like, how did you figure? Like, it was like a lot of stuff. So I think that actually just trying out new things is quite complicated in and of itself. Like, some of the things that you want to try are actually more difficult than you envision them to be. And then, the third thing is just that, like, laziness, probably. Like for me, like, it's definitely, there's a factor where I'm very comfortable with my daily routine and I know what I'm doing, and even though it may not be the most exciting or new or whatever, it is comfortable and comforting to me, versus like a new thing is like, ooh, this is like a little bit uncomfortable. It may be dangerous depending on what you decide to do. Like, if you wanted to like learn how to blow glass or something, or weld, for example. But yeah, I think those are, at least for me, those are probably like the top three reasons or thoughts that I have about it. What about you?
For me, I agree with a lot of what you said. I think laziness is certainly part of it if it's like a complicated thing, like you said. Like, sometimes it's like, I don't know, like, it wasn't a pandemic thing. It was just like a couple years ago, it started getting like millennial popular to get into like crocheting and like that kind of stuff. And I was like, that seems hard. And I don't want to like buy all those things and like have to read these books how to like learn the patterns and stuff. So I think there is a level of like, that sounds marginally interesting for me, but depends on if it's like interesting enough to get me to bother learning new skills. That's definitely part of it. I think the other part is as you get older, so like you said, everyone has a different risk profile to begin with, but I do think the general trend is like, if once you get older, you also start getting more and more risk averse. So like when you're younger, you definitely are like, what ifs, like, I'm gonna just try it out and like scrape your knee and get back up. But as you get older, you're like, like, not sure it's worth it. So I definitely for myself have noticed like it's harder for me to want to try new things as I've gotten older. But luckily for me, I have another counter push, which is Ramon, who's constantly pushing me to try new things. So it's kind of like, it's counteracting my trend towards like, let me just stay in my little comfort circle.
I think that's great. And maybe like you exposed another point about why people don't try new things, is that it's very rare that, not very rare, but like there aren't that many people that you'll know that are constantly trying new things. And those are usually the people where you would try new things with, because it's like, oh my God, we're like doing a thing together, we're taking a risk together. Like, it feels a little safer to do it with a friend or somebody you know. And there are not that many people trying new things. But on the other hand, I want to like maybe walk that back and say, like, I think my friends do interesting things that I don't do, and I could potentially also do those things if I was interested enough to just be like, hey, take me to your pottery class, or take me to your volunteering thing, or what have you. So I don't know.
I think that is one of the keys, though, the interest level, because like it could be something you think is interesting from like a talking point standpoint, or like good for them, that it's like super interesting for them and like a passion point for them. But when you try to think of like, would I be as interested in this? If the answer is no, you're just like not going to bother with taking up the extra steps that it would take to like learn that thing or like commit to practicing that thing. And that was honestly, even when I was younger, that was something that I learned pretty early, which is like, I have like light interest in many things, but not enough. I think we talked about this, but like not enough bother, frankly, to like want to put in a ton of hours to practice that thing to get like really good at it. Like, I always feel really bad for my mom because I had when I was starting to get into like bands and music and like thinking about A&R and stuff, I was like, oh, I'm gonna learn guitar. I don't know if you remember, but I tried to learn guitar for a while.
I remember that phase. It was short-lived?
It was, yeah, kind of. I mean, it was basically like, I think I went to lessons for at least a year.
Okay.
But it was once a week, and like I was so lazy about it. Like the guitar teacher would be like, "Oh, practice this song all week, and like we'll come back and like play it for me, and then I'll assign you another song." And I was so lazy. It was like I could not get myself to do it, and I'd do it like the hour or two before class. I'd like procrastinate practicing, and then he'd show up and be like, "You obviously haven't been practicing that."
Musical instruments and stuff is definitely like one of those things you really want to have to do. And I remember this very clearly because like with piano, I did want to do it because there were moments in time, and I don't mean like once every month or so, but like a few times every week where I was like, I really want to play piano. And so I was like, although I didn't practice as much as I should have, I was practicing because if you don't practice, you can't play it, then it's not fun. But with violin, I never took lessons, so I was just kind of like bullshitting my way around based off of what I knew about music from piano, and like the violin's only five strings? Five strings?
I think
so
it's
it's not as complicated. But eventually it caught up to me because like it just didn't practice violin at all because I didn't really care about it. And I wasn't good at it, so then it was like, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, well, clearly we know what happens when we're not truly that interested enough to take those risks and commit to those new things. Let's switch it up and go into something that we have recently tried and decided was worth our attention and effort. Jesse?
Oh, okay. Yeah, I will start. I just quit my job.
Yeah!
And yeah, I'm really excited. It's like a little bit of both worlds because I actually really, when I started this job, I really enjoyed it. And I really enjoyed the people who work in my function. And generally, like, I think the company is like a genuinely good place to work. But I've gone to a point where I just don't feel inspired is maybe the wrong word, because it's like there are very few people who are like inspired by that, but I just don't feel any like spark for the work that I do anymore. And there are also some frustrations with just managing some inter-team things. So it's like, I think it's time for me to go, but it's such a risky endeavor right now because in my head I'm like there's a million things that could go wrong. Like, it's going to be like fully remote, so you'll never have the chance to really like establish yourself with people in person. So you kind of really have to like lean in even more than you do in a regular office environment. And I was like, this is work that maybe I don't really have a lot of experience in, and the position's like a step back in terms of moving from like manager back to IC. But then I was like looking at the whole thing, and what really I think convinced me was actually one of the interviews that I did with my soon-to-be manager, which was like a technical interview. And it was a lot of fun because he gave me basically like a problem-solving question, and I was like, my brain was like, and I was like, okay, this is it, because this is the kind of like excitement that I had for my role at this last company originally, like really, really using all of my bullshit knowledge to come up with something real. and amazingly it works. So like, yeah, no, it was a lot of fun. So I'm glad I'm taking this leap of faith to join a new company, a new role during COVID, and I'm sure you'll hear from me again in a few episodes if it doesn't work out.
Well, I'm sure we won't hear from you then, because I'm sure it will work out.
Yeah. What about you?
Congratulations.
Thank you. Are you doing any big new? You have many.
Oh,
big
you
new
know,
things.
just I quit my job to do this podcast full time.
Yes.
And then BT. Yeah, we alluded to that the first episode back about me quitting my job. I don't think I had plugged that my plan essentially is to like work on this thing full time. I feel like this is definitely a huge risk for me in a lot of ways. I mean, it's not just changing jobs. It's like getting out of corporate America and like just focusing on a self-driven thing. And it's definitely very hard for my parents to understand. Like straight up every few weeks, including today, my dad will text or call me and be like, "Do you have money? Like, are you sure you're not poor?" It's like genuinely concerned.
Oh my god, I would be like, "Excuse me, do you know what my husband does for a living?" Like,
I mean, yeah, it's kind of that part's hard for them to wrap their heads around. I think because I'm of the two siblings, I'm the first one to get married, and then even prior to getting married, like they hadn't been used to either child having like a really long-term significant other that's like a true partner.
but this is what your dad wanted for you.
Yeah,
A
right.
rich honey buns. This is like his fantasy fulfilled.
No, I think his fantasy fulfilled is someone rich from a rich background he can understand.
Oh,
like
okay.
old money inherited from an empire.
Girl.
But this is like crypto money he doesn't understand. He thinks it's fake money. So, there's that.
It's a big leap. Yeah. I don't know if you guys know this or not, but Angela's like the pants, the shirts, the socks, the shoes, like the makeup of this whole thing, and I'm just like sometimes the voice. I'm the talent.
You're the talent. Exactly. I'm
She's
everything with
else.
talent secondary.
That's not true. You're half of the talent. You bring
true.
all the hard skills and the talent. But yes, very big risk. But it's funny because we were just saying as you get older we take less risks, but it seems like both of us are like, we're ready.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I think we're also past the we respectively had our midlife crises a few years ago, right? And I think we're like well past that hump to maybe we're at the point where we're more ready to take new risks to like, open up that next chapter to something else.
Yes. I don't know. I don't think I had the crisis that you mentioned.
Oh, I did.
I think I am currently experiencing a like slowly rolling crisis, like a small tsunami that has yet to hit anything.
Those are dangerous.
I mean, it's not if it doesn't
when it's
if it
coming.
doesn't hit anything. We'll pray that it doesn't hit anything.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So we're talking about existential crisis, so like life things.
Yeah, that's the other kind of part of this is that because I no longer work for a company, we're going to be remote for the next year, and we're going to be living in Europe for some time and then Asia for most of 2022. And for this podcast, it also means that one of the things I'm interested in doing is like meeting more people on the ground in the different countries that we're going to be in and like interviewing them about their experiences, because obviously everyone's upbringings and surroundings create like a very different shaping of your life. So I'm looking forward to meeting those folks, hearing those stories, and bringing them to this pod as well.
That sounds really exciting.
Yeah. Well, hopefully you'll be part of it. It kind of depends on time zones. If it's like 2 a.m. for you.
Well, sure, we'll make it work somehow. You can always just splice in B-roll of me being, Yes.
Yes. That would be really funny. I like that. I think I'll just have you in the corner, like not even a third. I'll just have you like an emoji that
Okay,
like
perfect.
pops up.
Or like a bad lip reading situation. I could just be like, oh my God, I could. No, that would be rude. I was gonna say I could do a bad sign language, but that would be rude.
No,
Yeah.
I don't think so. Yeah, no. Other life experiments. I mean, I don't want to get too much into it because we want to do a whole episode about this, but obviously a big part of our respective experimentations recently have been substance related.
Yes, I agree. I would say like for me, this has been really also connected to a regression in age, because I've been partying a lot more and I have this like desire to go out and like meet people and go dancing and stuff like that, which is really, really different from what like weak Jesse wants to do. Like weak Jesse, work week Jesse wants to eat pizza. Work week Jesse wants to watch TV. Work week Jesse wants to sleep. That's all he wants. Those are the three things that he wants to do. And like this new me, party me, is like on the weekend emerges and it's like, let's go out, let's go drinking, let's do crazy stuff. Like, so it's a little bit of a little bit strange because they're quite different. And then what usually happens on Fridays is they get in a really big fight on what they want to do because one person just wants to go to sleep and the other person wants to turn up. So yeah, it's been interesting.
Well, I think what you described has like two things I want to dig into. One is like you kind of just sound like a bear that's like hibernating during the week to like come out hard on the weekends. So that's one. And the other is I actually disagree with you that you didn't have a quarter life crisis, because I think your quarter life crisis came when you broke up with your last boyfriend, because you essentially had to become a completely different human, because reason you said that you regressed, quote unquote, regressed in age is because, if we haven't already talked about this before, when you're in that other long-term relationship, you essentially like jumped forward into like old married couple land for like many, many years. And you didn't do the partying and like the crazy young stuff while you were actually in your early and mid 20s. So you essentially are like reclaiming those years back now.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I need to, you're right. I need to correct that statement. I didn't have it at the same time that you did. You said you had yours like when you were like 25, 26. Mine didn't happen until like 2 years ago. Yeah, 2 years ago. And yeah, it was very much like lesbian bed death into reclaiming my time, and I'm at reclaiming my time currently still.
Do you think, because you said both of our life crises happen at different moments, but they happened, I would still say that it's in the quarter life range, right? But both of ours happened after significant things happening. So yours was like post a significant breakup, and mine was post MBA, after like getting into my first post MBA job and kind of realizing like, is this it? Is this what I worked so hard for? Like, I'm not sure I feel fulfilled, like, do you think that people are only willing to make big pivots in life when something big like that like shakes up your life?
Ooh, that's a good question. Look at you, Barbara Walters.
2020, let's go.
Or more accurate, Connie Chung.
Yes.
Are people willing to take bigger risks after bigger events in their life? I think it really depends on what kind of event it is. Like, I feel like if you are doing something really happy, really fulfilling, you're taking a huge risk to do something that you're going to be really psyched about, you may not take another big risk after that. Or if something like really big and nice happened to you, I'm not sure you would take another risk after that. Because for me, I'm thinking about it like, okay, if this really great thing happened to me, I'm going to be pretty risk averse afterwards, because I want to hold on to this great thing that just happened to me. But I would say the opposite is true, and maybe that's kind of like what happened to us. It's not that anything bad happened, or a breakup is not great, and neither is a is this it moment in the mid 20s. Like, they're not great, but it's not like you got hit by a bus and survived or something, like, you know what I mean? Like, so it's like a situation where it forces you to rethink about your priorities in life and whether or not where you are currently makes you happy. And sometimes I feel like when you come to that realization, you're like, oh my God, like, this isn't for me, or this isn't happy for me. You're more willing to take a bigger risk to try and get out of that situation, because you're like, holy shit, like, I didn't realize it, but I just spent like the last X years of my life doing this, and it was like terrible, and I don't like it, and like, what the fuck? And so you're like, all right, now I'm gonna do this like big leap of faith to try and break myself out of that, or at least try something that's like outside of the comfort area that I've been in. And so I would agree with you when it's the situation where you are having like a point of reflection about your life and you realize that you're not satisfied with where you are or where you have been.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I'm thinking back on like every time I started a new job or like decided to move or like do something big. And I do think it always came after some sort of reflection of like, oh, I'm dissatisfied. Like taking that time to really let that sink in. But I'm just posing discussion points, which is essentially like, I think you and I feel similar in that sense. Similarly, in that like something happens that makes you reassess. But I also know people who like have been discontented for some time and they just won't make any moves. Like, and it kind of actually like bothers me quite a bit when I meet someone that's like constantly bitching about their current situation but doing nothing to change it. Mm-hmm. Do you know people like that? And then if so, like, what do you think is kind of like the difference that why wouldn't they, if they are, it's like staring straight in the face at them of like, you're unhappy, why wouldn't they do something about it?
Well, okay, I'm probably gonna get this completely wrong, so anyone who's a psych major can like read me, send me comments, call in. That's right. Write us a DM, email us. But I feel like one of the fundamental things that people are averse to is change. Yeah. And most people, I would say, like, if you're a really contented person, I'm not sure why you would go looking for change, because the circumstances and things in your life make you content. So you like don't need to search for anything else. I would say like people who are, what's the difference between people who are discontent and don't do anything and people who are discontent and do something? I just feel like it's just that they haven't reached the point where they're gonna tip into action, or that's like the first thing. Because I also like, I think when we were talking about this, like there is like an inflection point where you're like, this is enough. Like I've been unhappy, like I need to make a change and I'm gonna do it. So they haven't reached that point yet. Like they know they're unhappy, but they haven't gone to the place where they're like, I feel so much about this and I'm clear on what I need to do next that I'm gonna go do something about it. The other thing is just that, yeah, like I was saying, like people don't like to change things that are big in their lives. So like a career, a job is a very big thing in everyone's lives, right? It's how you not die and eat food and stuff like that. So like, even though people might be unhappy, they might not want to change it because it's familiar. Like, you know, they understand, they know what the pond is, they know how big it is, they know how to swim in it. You know, it gives them fundamentally what they need, right? They may have insurance, they have a salary, they may have other benefits, and it's a lot of effort actually to change jobs. It's like not that easy. So I think like it's like people who haven't reached the point, and it's people who are like discontent, but they don't want to put in the effort to change that. Like they're happy to be with that discontent, and they think they will be more discontent by trying to get their way out of it, if that makes sense. So that's what I think, at least for me, because there are individuals like that where I'm like, oh my God, like you've worked in this position for how long, or you worked at this company for how long? Like, are you sure you want to be here? Like, I don't know. Yeah. So I think it's kind of like that for me.
My mind went into a very dark place while you were while you were talking, and I
What?
was like, this is like an abusive relationship, and like people who find it difficult to leave an abusive relationship. It's
Yeah,
like,
no, yeah.
it's
No,
obviously bad for you, but it's really difficult to leave that kind of situation.
yeah, I mean, I think it's really tough, especially, like we're getting older, right? So we have friends who have families or are currently planning, but you're planning for a family now. And I think if you think about security for your family, it can be really hard to leave, right? Like if you're working at, let's say, a big tech company where the benefits are really cushy, you have insurance covered for everyone in your family, you might have all these like side benefits for like parental care, nanny, baby, whatever. It can be really hard to leave, even if you don't particularly like the job, because it's like I have to think about not just what I want currently, but like what are all these things that are like covering my family and like long term yada 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 yada. So I think that can like really contribute to a situation where a person is discontent, but they're not going to move out of where they are because there's a lot of risk involved in doing so that doesn't just implicate themselves. Yeah.
Yeah, actually, that makes me look at things in a different lens, which is not just the risk tolerance or not. It's that I think a big reason that people accept discontentment for themselves is that their priorities have changed in life, which is like, what is the most important thing to me right now? Maybe it's not my job. Maybe it is my family, and their well-being and being able to provide for them. I mean, because I'm like thinking back on the people where I have been like, why don't you just change your job? And when I think about their lives, I'm like, yeah, it's very obvious that they have like another big priority in their life that is like more important to them than their career. So they will continue to just be like, I don't love it. I'm not that happy with it, but I'm not going to like do anything about it because I'm spending my energy elsewhere and like making sure that that part is fulfilled, which is cool too.
It's hard to say sometimes, like just kind of face value when you look at people that you may or may not be super familiar with and like their choices. So I'm just kind of like, I know where I'm going, I know where I'm at, and that's all that really matters.
Okay, so let's also speculate on why else people might not make these big life decisions. And I think one of the things we've talked about is that these are such big moments or big decisions in life. Things like what career you're going to have, like who is going to be your partner in life, and like these big choices. But there's no North Star or like guidebook, or it's not like our parents really like taught us a certain direction to go, or anywhere else really. I think the US and the American mentality of like, it's your freedom, like freedom of choice, like it's your life, you're so independent, like figure it out. It is hard, especially when a lot of those things you have to figure out when you're really young. Like working back on the career, right? It's like before you even know what career you want, you have to decide what school you're going to go to and what major you're going to do in that school. And you decide that shit when you're like 15 or 16, right? Because that's when your like high school counselors kind of up your ass about like, you got to decide. And you work it all back from there. It's like, what did I know then? And no one's telling me any which way. It's just like,
Yeah, and I don't feel like the current, I mean, like we went to pretty good schools.
Yeah.
Like, but one of the things that's lacking, I feel like, is like nobody really explains to you like what's the impact of making the selection that you're making currently, and like what are your options per se, like what you can do life-wise. It's kind of just like, okay, go to college and then you'll figure it out
right
in college. And I'm like, well, I didn't really, like maybe I kind of did, but like it's not like I suddenly met someone like a career life fairy in college that like sorted it all out for me. So yeah, I have to agree with you there. And I just think like it's what you said, like there are so many big decisions and important things that people are expecting teenagers to figure out that it's like mind-boggling. Like for example, filling out the FAFSA, like what the fuck, man. And I was on Facebook recently, and I think I forgot it was at AOC, one of the electeds was like, oh, we're hosting a Zoom with people from the DOE explaining like common problems with the FAFSA and like how you can avoid them. And I was reading and I was looking and I was like, common problems. why do you have a zoom on this? Just make it easier to fill out. Like, what the fuck? Like, so I'm like, it's crazy. Like that you have to do all these big life things. They're super complicated. Nobody really explains to you the implications of all of these things. And it's kind of just like given that somebody will tell you, but like as we've discussed in the past, like our parents aren't going to know that. They didn't grow up here. They didn't go through that process. And even for people whose parents did grow up here, like the process to get into a college now is so convoluted. They're probably like, I don't know what this is. Like, so it's like all this, to your point, like freedom, like you get the choice to try to figure out what's happening, but it's so complicated. Like who among us actually figured out all of it? Like, I know some people did, but I would say the large majority of people didn't. And so I think that's probably why, like, it's complicated.
Yeah, and for those that are not US based or didn't have to go through this process, the FAFSA is essentially this like very complicated application form or something that you have to fill out before you go to college that essentially determines how much federal aid you get, like if how much you qualify based on your parents' like income levels and like other factors for determining how much you qualify in loans versus like grants. And yeah, it's an incredibly important thing to fill out because it determines how much out of pocket you have to pay for college, which can be hundreds of thousands of dollars now with today's price tag on education. But there is no easy way to figure out how to fill that shit out, and it's dumb. It's very dumb.
For all of our foreign listeners, that's right. Hundreds of thousands of dollars for your undergraduate education, depending.
And the one where you had the choice to choose what it was, if you came out with a poetry major and find no jobs because you realized that's not what you really wanted to do forever, you're a little screwed.
Yeah. I feel like it's hard for people to take risks because the environment of the US, at least for me, is not conducive to making it easy to take risks. So like even if you think about like American dream life path, like college. So we just talked about college is a clusterfuck, like to try to figure out, okay, like after college, what might you encounter? You might get married, or you might buy a property. Like those are one of the things, right? How was the marriage process? Complicated?
More complicated than I thought. Honestly, yes.
Yeah. So okay, complicated. Buying a property, so complicated.
Very complicated.
So
very
complicated. Like, and so it's like, these are the things that everyone is like, oh my God, that's for me. It's my life. Everyone's going for these things, but all of these things are so hard to do. You would imagine that like, after so much time and so many people yearning after these things, it would be easier to do these things, but in fact, it's much harder. So it's just like, yeah, of course you wouldn't take a risk because it's like, I barely understand what exactly is happening in this complex financial transaction, which will fund where I live. Yeah.
Another really big important one is personal finance, which we've talked about in the past as well, because I think how you invest your money is also a big way that can factor into like how strapped you are in your life and like what kind of job you need to have or whatnot. Because if you know how to invest your money and it like does well for you, you are just like, you have more freedom to do other things. But no one's out here teaching personal finance to 18-year-olds or whatever. So, and I think a challenge with like all these things, like we are also in the information age where like all this information exists somewhere, but it is like, it's really hard to find like the right, like the, you know, best source of information for each of these things to know who to trust. I think that there's like a pro con, right, with the idea of like being able to Google and YouTube anything is that you can't necessarily know which is like the best source of information. You can find everyone's opinion and like every little thing, but is it the best thing? Who knows? Yeah.
And again, it's just not easy. Like it's a little complicated to understand how to properly invest. So like like with risk taking, I think these are all the reasons that people in general don't take as much. Like I'm thinking about it, like if I knew that I would always have a place to live, that I would always have health insurance, I think I would take more risks with the things that I was doing in my life. Like I would probably change jobs more. I might do some other things because I'm not scared that I'm going to be like homeless or not be able to see the doctor because of it. But it's just, I think it's like all these foundational things are like difficult to understand, and so it can cause people not to take as many risks, I feel like.
I see where you're coming from, because a lot of our kind of like risk averse foundation comes from worrying about like foundational things like housing and just security. Yeah. But I think there's also the other aspect, which like we've talked about with like Western versus Eastern and whatever, which is like American dream versus more kind of socialist things. And I would argue the countries where you are guaranteed housing and health insurance don't have that many risk takers because they're a little bit more content. So back to your original thing of like, don't rock the boat when you're content. There's not a lot of risk taking and like innovation from more socialist leaning societies. And America, where it is really uncertain, but it also means there's a lot of like untapped opportunity because you don't necessarily know where that opportunity is. You have a lot of hustlers that are like out there trying to make it, and they do the ones who figure it out can make something of it.
I don't know though, that seems so harsh. Like
it's
either like you have some safety but you're kind of maybe won't do anything special, or you might die unless you figure it out.
I mean, I don't think you're gonna die. I think that's a pretty extreme.
Okay, you might suffer some serious financial drawbacks, which could impact your access to housing and healthcare and all that jazz.
Life's hard, man. I think the conclusion is life's hard.
So rough. Why can't we do both?
So knowing that all this shit is really hard to figure out, what do you think you would have wished for to have had when you were younger and kind of like not knowing a lot about these big things? Like what would have helped you make those life choices better?
Okay, so it's really hard for me to say because I'm the kind of person that learns the best by doing something. And so like when I don't do it, it's naturally quite easy for me to forget like how to do it or why it's important. So I think it can be a little bit difficult, but I just think like having more real representations of the impacts of the choices people make to go to, to do certain like life actions, and like explaining that clearly to you at key stages of your life would be super helpful. And I just think that we didn't really have that, and it wasn't quite easy to find. It's like it's like what you're saying about the internet, like the resources are there probably, but like you have to like do a little bit of more work to actually find the resource which will help you do the original thing that you wanted to do to begin with, which is like pretty convoluted. So I think just like having more examples of like what does happen if you go to NYU for a poetry scholarship, like what are the outcomes in a person. I think that would, because you can see the outcomes like on paper sometimes because they list those things, but as in a person, I think it would be really helpful. And also not just those like really exceptional people, because usually like they might have that, but it's like the person who came out and became the poet laureate, and I'm like, well, there's only one poet laureate, bitch. Like we can't all be that.
Let me talk to all the other ones in their class.
Yeah, like they need more real examples of like people coming out and like what's the average situation look like. And also just to make things generally easier for everyone to understand. Like, Jesus Christ, like I went to college. I'm not dumb, but some of the things like you need to know or like read to finance certain things are so complicated that I'm like, of course people are iced out of certain things. Like if I can't even understand it, how could someone who never graduated from high school, who never did all of this educational stuff possibly obtain that? It just is ridiculous. So examples easy.
Yes, absolutely. For me, I think just better utilizing like the kind of courses that we had in high school would have been really helpful, because thinking back, I'm like, wow, when's the last time anyone restructured curriculum for high school? Because if you think about it, things like home ec and like what the fuck is that other one that where you just like build things, like the workshop woodshop and home ec. Can we talk about, they must have invented that back in like 1920, right? They're like, home ec is for women so that they can learn to be good wives, so that they can learn how to sew and to cook, because that's all I did in home ec. And then woodshop is for the boys. Yeah.
Oh wow.
And woodshop, I did both. I don't know, I was able to do both, but and woodshop is for men, because men are manly and do things like build things from raw wood and like from, with their own hands. But like, how useful is that shit right now versus like making everyone take a personal finance course so that they understand what money is, and like even having a simulator of like, here's fake money that like you can invest in a portfolio, or like, just put into a bank account, or like do some shit, right, that like simulates real life before you are in real life. I think would have been incredibly useful. And then I also think like in college is when internships were more of a thing, right? But I think they should start that kind of stuff in high school, or like even if it's shadowing type stuff. Like, hey, if you're like marginally interested in becoming something like a businessman or whatever, what does that mean? Like, I'm sure they can hook it up with like someone's parents like work in that company, and you get to just like shadow for the day. You let like 5 high school kids like shadow for the day, that kind of stuff, so that they get more exposure to like real life shit before they have to make it out for themselves. I think it's just like, to your similar point of like, more hands-on and like just more experience. I think kids need to be more exposed to like the options in life and what it takes to live in real life before they're just like thrown out to the wind in college.
So I will say I did attend so there was like an internship thing program that I did in high school, and it was through some kind of like retraining program. Like it was for older people to retrain them for different industries, but if you were in high school you could do it for free. And but it wasn't easy to like find it. Like I had to go seek it out, because I was like, oh fuck, like I don't know what I want to do with my life, and I have to do these extracurriculars for college, blah 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 blah. And it also like there was just a lot of effort involved. Like it like I had to drive like I think all the way to, I don't know, somewhere far away. It was like not super close, and so it was like not easy to access. Well, on that note, shall we transition to the fortune cookie?
Yes.
We'll end on a sweet treat to show our commitment to this new groove of trying new things. We want to talk about something new that we're going to try immediately. So, Angela, what's something are you going to try immediately?
In 9 days, I am doing what? No, in 9 days. My God, I'm gonna die. What's happening? No, in 9 days, I will be heading towards a silent meditation retreat that lasts for 10 days, where I cannot bring anything, including a journal. I will give up my phone and other means of outside communication and just meditate in silence for 10 days.
Oh my God.
And we have an episode planned where we will debrief on what that was like. But that is my big new thing that I've never done, that is scary to me, that I'm doing imminently.
That sounds... Honestly, when you told me silent meditation at first, I was like, oh yeah, that's cool. And I didn't really think that it was like you cannot talk at all. Like I just thought it was like, oh, you have to be quiet when you're meditating. And
I mean, that's true, but you're also meditating the entire day.
Well,
so.
that's the thing, is when you told me that, I was like, that's crazy. I will lose my mind. When I'm bored, I talk to my cat.
I mean, I will talk to myself in my head, apparently. You know what I mean? Like, we'll see how that goes.
Inner
how about
dialogue. Inner monologue.
Yes.
Wow, I feel like I had a really good answer for this and then like I forgot it. I think what I'm okay, so like I've been going through some like mood swings because it's sad and cold here now.
Yeah.
And also just like my life has just been pretty stressful recently, but I've been trying to get more into this whole like sitting with my feelings thing, which is like instead of trying to avoid negative feelings, I'm just trying to, I hate the word lean into it, but I'm trying to like feel into it.
Yeah.
To try to not like understand it necessarily, but just to kind of like embrace it and like see where that goes. And I found that works quite well when I combine it with like a physical activity. So like if I go for a walk or if I go biking or something like that. So I think I'm going to do more of that when I'm feeling like not in a good mood, because what I found is like a lot of the times that'll happen in the middle of the workday because I'm like frustrated, something happens, but then like I'm like, oh my god, I don't have time, like I have to sit here meeting, whatever, and then it just feels like I'm like crazy. I just feel crazy, and I need to like physically remove myself from this space to go like to be able to like hug that emotion without like exploding into a million pieces. So yeah, I think I'm going to start doing that more. I did that today and it was very nice.
That's awesome. That's very mature and something that I need to figure out how to do myself.
It honestly, I want to tell you, like half the time I don't do it properly. I come back and I'm like even angrier than I was when I left. I'm like, oh, no. But yeah, I just think I've been trying to, the whole idea of like make space for emotions and like make space for things. I'm like, okay, I'm going to physically make space and see how that goes. Yeah.
I like it.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we will debrief also to see if you've gotten better at that after my silent meditation retreat. We can have a check-in point.
Yes.
All right. Well, listeners, we've now come to the end of the episode. And as always, we seek your feedback and your experiences. So this episode was about trying new things, taking risks. Write us in about something that you've recently tried for the first time, or something you're so happy that you tried for the first time that you didn't think you would do, or something you immediately regret having tried. Like, we want to hear it all. So write us in at telluswhereyou'refrom@gmail.com, and maybe we'll share your experience on the show.
It can be anything. We talked about big things, but maybe you tried concealer for the first time recently.
Hey, I did. Jessie did.
And as always, come back next week for a fresh new episode. Until then, 再见,
bitches.